As a dating coach, I'm constantly hearing from guys who feel they're getting the short end of the stick in their relationships, and in many cases, they're right. We're talking things like women withholding sex, constantly guilting you, money problems, constant fighting, and then maybe the worst of all, the girl cheating, going behind your back. Eventually, inevitably, the relationship fails, and the guy sits there not knowing why. What the hell did he do wrong? It turns out a lot of relationships end not because someone made a mistake and not because the woman's the devil, but because of one fundamental thing that's missing. I'm going to tell you about that in this video. It's a little controversial, but it's very, very important. As you may know, a big part of what I do is I take guys out in the real world on programs called boot camps to go learn how to meet women. And I get a variety of clients on these boot camps, but one of the most consistent types of clients I get is the guy who just got divorced. And they come out and they are terrified because it's been years and years since they've had to date. And they're also confused and hurt because they have no idea how it all went wrong. I hear so many incredibly sad stories from men. Here's just one example. Recently, I had a client where his wife pushed him and drove him to basically work himself to a state of poor health, getting massively overweight. That caused her to become unattracted to him and then go cheat on him. And then she left and took most of the money he had worked so hard for over all these years. So now he shows up on program, broke, overweight, lost, confused, and just sad as hell. That's obviously one of the really bad versions of the story, but to varying degrees, it's the same story over and over again. And the thing is, the cause of this story is not about the people involved. It's not like they're horrible people or they were never in love. Oftentimes, it's actually a structural issue with the relationship. The relationship was actually doomed to fail based on how it was created. Now, your friends, family, society, they would probably tell you the reason it didn't work is you're just not compatible. It wasn't meant to be. But in fact, you were probably really compatible. That's why you got into the relationship in the first place. It's not a compatibility thing. It's something that's missing. What's missing is a contract. And no, I'm not talking necessarily about a legal contract like a prenup, although that would be useful for a lot of people. What I'm talking about is the fundamental contractual understanding between you and the woman of what the relationship is. And this exists in every relationship from the first date all the way through a marriage and even a divorce. This implied contract in a relationship encompasses literally everything. From who pays on the first date, to what side of the bed you sleep on, to who takes out the trash, to whose parents do you go to on the holidays. This contract also covers big things like who's the breadwinner, how often and in what ways do you have sex, and what's considered cheating within the relationship. All of this is a contract. All of it is actually negotiable, and from one relationship to another, it can actually be different. So the fundamental first mistake that guys make with regards to this contract is either not knowing that a contract is being formed and just letting it form organically and randomly, or letting the woman make all the decisions about what the contract is. If you don't have a part in the contract negotiations, if you're just accepting the societal narrative or just accepting whatever the woman wants as the parameters of your relationship, it's unlikely you're gonna randomly end up in an ideal case for yourself. A lot of failed relationships might look something like this. The guy starts out chasing the girl super hard, willing to do anything and everything for her. So the woman makes a lot of demands. The woman says, you have to do this, you have to do that. Or she starts getting angry at the man for rules he didn't even know existed. And of course, trying to please the woman, he admits he was wrong, gives in, and follows the new rule that was just created behind his back. Another example would be the girl's friend comes to you and says the girl needs this, this, and this from you, and she's upset, and you, out of guilt, decide to do some things that maybe you don't really want to do or you're a little bit uncomfortable with. And then once you give in on one thing, you get asked for another thing, and another thing, and another thing. One very common way these rules can be established is if it's clear within the relationship that the man wants sex and the woman is withholding sex, she may set up a bunch of parameters. In order to have sex with me, you need to do this, 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 and this. Those are now expectations you need to keep following if you want to keep having sex. So as you can see, a lot of these relationships are starting off on the wrong foot with the guy having no power. As the woman starts getting her way and getting her demands met, she makes more and more and more demands. And this just compounds year after year after year over the course of the relationship. And by the way, it's not all the woman's fault. It's not that the woman is evil. If someone is able to ask for something and get it over and over and over again, at what point logically should they stop asking? They probably shouldn't. It makes sense for them to keep asking for each favor along the way. If you as a man want a more favorable contract, there's two things that are going to be critical elements. Number one, you need to have the balls to stand up and negotiate. You need to be able to stand up for yourself. But secondly, you need to have some idea what contract you actually want. If you don't have an idea of what you're pushing for, you're certainly never going to get there. So at this point, I'm going to give you a very brief assignment, which is this. I want you to think about what your ideal relationship would look like. And I want you to do this whether you're in a relationship right now or not. If you're not in a relationship, I want you to draw up all the parameters of what your ideal relationship would be and go nuts. Put stuff on there that you don't even think is reasonable. You can always back it out later, but write down in detail exactly what your ideal relationship would look like on every level. How often would you have sex? What would your roles in the relationship be? What are her obligations in the relationship? What types of things do you do on dates? How much free time do you get? How often do you have sex? And yes, even who do you get to have sex with? If you're in an existing relationship, I want you to do this also, but I want you to do two versions. I want you to do your ideal version, and then I want you to do kind of an intermediate version, which is taking your current relationship and moving it in the direction of your ideal version. Because you're probably not going to be able to change everything overnight, but you can gradually move things into a more positive direction. All right, so at this point, you know that relationships are a contract, and you have some idea of what the contractual relationship you'd like to have is. Now comes the hard part, negotiating the contract. And this is the part that might be a little bit controversial. Negotiations come down to a power dynamic. In every relationship, at any given moment, one person wants more from the other person than the other person wants from them. The person who needs the relationship more has less power. The person who needs the relationship less has more power. Let's do a little thought experiment. Imagine you were sent into a negotiation and you were told you absolutely have to reach an agreement, otherwise you will be killed. You're already screwed because you're going to be desperate. But now imagine the person you're negotiating with knows this. Well, they're just going to make ask after ask after ask, and you're going to make concession after concession after concession, and you're going to end up with a completely horrible deal. Fundamentally, if you want to make a good deal, you have to be willing to walk away. In fact, if you're more willing to walk away than the girl is, you're going to make a deal on your terms. If she's more willing to walk away than you are, she's going to make a deal on her terms. And there are two aspects to walk away power. One is your willingness to walk away. The other is you bringing enough value that the other person doesn't want to. Because if you're not bringing value to the relationship, if the other person doesn't care, if the other person is not emotionally invested, you can walk away, they'll walk away, and that'll just end the relationship for both parties. The key idea is this. For any concession you want in a relationship, there's a certain amount of leverage or power necessary. And you can negotiate that concession with that amount of leverage or power, but if you over-negotiate, it ends the relationship. And this is why if you're in an existing relationship, before you can start negotiating any terms, what I would actually recommend you do is just start bringing a ton of value to the relationship. Start being an amazing boyfriend, start being better in bed, start being funnier, start doing the things that make her happy that she's not demanding. This does not mean start giving into more and more of her demands, but it does mean create a situation where she would be afraid to lose you because she's getting so much from you. And then from there, the demands you make should be nibbles. They should be small things here, small things there that gradually add up. If you try and negotiate too hard or too fast, you're just going to end up with fights or the girl leaving. So this is a gradual process. And a note on this. While I mentioned that walk-away power is the ultimate power in a relationship, if you have to negotiate by threatening to walk away all the time, you're doing it wrong. You should be negotiating from a position of offering value and positivity first. The walk away is only a last resort. And also remember, while a relationship is contractual, it is also based on shared value. You need to be providing as much value as you are asking for in return. If you're watching this and you're not in a relationship, you're in some ways in a better position and in some ways in a worse position than the person who is. On the one hand, you need to go find a relationship with a girl you actually like, and that's, the subject of the rest of my channel. So you have your work to put in there. But in terms of forming the relationship, in a way, you're in a better circumstance because you get to start off with the relationship on your terms from day one. And the best way to start negotiating a contract is not to make it an active negotiation or some kind of like hard-nosed head-to-head thing. It's to just start having the relationship you want. So if you want a relationship where you see the girl once a week, start off seeing her once a week. Don't go see her 5 days in a week and then try and back it off to once a week. And if you want a relationship where you do healthy things together, don't go binge drinking and eat a bunch of fast food in the first week of the relationship. Almost any contract that you want is possible, but here's the thing you have to understand. The more concessions you're asking for in a contract, the more value you have to bring. For example, if we're talking about something like an open relationship, if the girl's only going to get a third of your time, you have to be more than 3 times better than the other guy who she could get 100% of his time. So while any contract is negotiable, you can only negotiate the contract that you're bringing enough value to sustain. Now, throughout this video, some of the advice that I've given may come off as a little bit win-lose or heavy-handed. That's not the intention. A relationship should not be a zero-sum affair. It should not be a situation where somebody wins, another person loses. Ideally, in a relationship, you providing something and her providing something leaves exponentially more for both of you. The contract only works if there is a ton of value, a ton of joy, a ton of positive experience to actually be argued over or to be negotiated over. In a relationship, you providing your experience and her providing her experience should mean that there's exponentially more there for both of you. This negotiation only works if there's so much surplus for you to negotiate over. So most of your time and energy in the relationship is about building value and having an amazing experience together. Hopefully these negotiations are infrequent and not a major feature of the relationship. It is important though to negotiate them early, because when you negotiate them early, it actually frees you up to have a more positive relationship and negotiate them less often later on. It's a lot easier to set a soft expectation early on than it is to let things get out of control and have to put a hard stop to it later. So this negotiation should primarily exist in the formation of the relationship, and the relationship itself should be mostly a joy and a pleasure for both you and the girl. So those are some broad strokes regarding the relationship contract and how to have relationships on your own terms. Obviously, there is a ton of detail and a ton of nuance in all of this, which is why I'm currently working on a relationship course. If you have questions about the topics in this video regarding the relationship contract, how to negotiate it, how to offer value, or just questions about relationships in general, as well as if you want to share a relationship sob story or give me thoughts about what you'd like to see in the upcoming relationship product, go ahead and put those down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Take care. See you on the next video.